So tomorrow's primary day in Florida. One of the races to watch is in the state's 20th congressional district. Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz running here after Republicans redrew the congressional map. She is seeking her 12th term in Congress. She is the former chair of the DNC, and my next guest hopes to unseat her. 27-year-old Elijah Manley joins me now. He is a self-described socialist. His positions include Medicare for all and abolishing ICE. Elijah, thank you very much for joining me today. It's good to have you.
Thank you for having me, Martha.
Thank you. I want to play this from earlier today. This is Rahm Emanuel, obviously a very prominent member of the Clinton administration and someone that some people think may seek higher office. Here's what he had to say about the DSA or socialist candidates running now.
The Democratic Socialists, 3 weeks ago in Chicago, they had a convention. Run on your own ticket. If you're confident people want it, we'll see you in November. If you think they want defunding the police, letting prisoners out, I'll see you in November on the ballot. And if you're confident that that's what people want, go for it.
So what do you say to him, Elijah?
I think Rahm Emanuel should just be quiet. I think right now we are a big tent party. We welcome the wide range of ideas and free speech that we have. I'm not for defunding the police, and I don't think anyone is running around saying defund the police. But I find it really strange that we have an individual in our party like Rahm Emanuel attacking the Democratic Party in such a pivotal year.
This is Speaker Hakeem Jeffries, or Minority Leader, I should say, Hakeem Jeffries on yesterday. Watch this.
I do not support defunding the police. I do not support open borders. I do not support abolishing the Senate. And I don't support the DSA agenda as has been articulated by the DSA itself. What I'm excited about are the candidates who are running to flip seats in November to deliver us a majority.
So let's address and get your thoughts on the idea of open borders. Do you believe that anybody who wants to enter the country should be able to enter, even if they do it breaking the law?
Well, Martha, I'm not a supporter of open borders, but I'm also not a supporter of having an agency kidnapping Americans off the street like ICE has, where you have untrained people, 19-year-olds, they pulled off the street and gave, guns to. That's not how we do things in America. I think that we need to have law and order, but the only way to have law and order is to have trained individuals following the law. These are paperwork violations for the most part. The data doesn't show that you have mass amounts of immigrants killing people. Some people show anecdotes and the one-off incidents, but the fact is, we had good bipartisan legislation that Democrats tried to get passed through the Congress, and unfortunately Donald Trump killed it.
Let me ask you this. First of all, as you know, ICE would dispute what you're saying there. I've spent time with ICE agents in Texas. They're hardworking. They're upholding the laws that exist on the books, that if you enter the country illegally, and especially if you have a criminal record or a detainer against you, you have to be removed. And when they wake up in the morning and they show up at work, they have assignments that are given to them to remove people who are criminal or who have remove orders against them. Do you have any problem with someone who fits that criteria being apprehended and removed from our country?
Well, I just don't think it's a good idea to take someone who committed a murder and say, go back home and live free and enjoy the rest of your life. If someone comes to this country and they commit murder or violence, we have American jails that we can put them in and make sure they never see daylight again. But the idea that, we pick somebody off the street that committed murder, and by the way, it's not that many people we're talking about here. We're talking about a very small number of people with these criminal records.
That may be,
Most
but
people that come to this country don't have
may be,
criminal
Elijah.
records.
Okay, so let's talk about the specific instances where they do, because there have been thousands of people who have criminal records. They may not commit a crime here, but they came here with a criminal record from another country, and they came here illegally, right? I mean, we all come from somewhere. We've all been brought into this country, and we come here to build a life. But if you are a criminal, you break that social contract. You don't have the right to stay in the country anymore. Tell that to these women whose faces I'm putting up on the screen now: Laken Riley, Sheridan Gorman, whose family I have spent a lot of time with, Rachel Morin, Jocelyn Nungery. She was 12 years old when she was attacked by these men, who I'll put up after them. who were in the country illegally, had no right to be here. Imagine if a person that you loved in your family was killed or raped or murdered by someone who wasn't even here legally. How would you feel about that?
Well, here's what I say. My heart obviously hurts for those people, but we can't, base entire arguments off of anecdotes, one-off incidents. I mean, the data is not showing that you have thousands of people being murdered or killed by illegal immigrants in the country. That's just not true. We don't have to use fear in our arguments when we're talking about immigration. We want to have law and order, but we want to have a system that works. We want to create a pathway to citizenship for people.
Elijah, I'm not talking about fear. I'm talking about reality. I'm talking about reality, and I don't know that it matters.
Well, the data just doesn't support your argument.
Okay, so you're saying if there's thousands of people or hundreds of people who have committed crimes, you're just going to let them stay because the larger argument doesn't support it, or would you remove someone?
No, if they're committing murders, then they should go to prison. That's what I'm saying. I mean, I understand that some Republicans want to take these individuals and give them a vacation back at home, but they should go to prison. Is what they should do. If they kill an American, they should go to prison. But Republicans want to give them a vacation and take them to another country in the Latin American.
I don't think anyone wants to give them a vacation. No one wants to give them a vacation.
Well, then let's put them in prison if they're committing murders, right?
But hold on. But we're talking about two different things. I'm saying if they come into the country illegally, which means crossing the border illegally, and they have a rap sheet back in their own country, are you okay with them staying here?
What I'm saying is if a murderer comes into the United States of America, sending them back for them to just come back over the border doesn't make sense to me. If you're a murderer coming to this country, put you in jail. That's all I'm saying. I mean, Republicans want to give these folks a vacation. I'm not interested in giving a criminal a vacation.
That's ridiculous. I don't know what you're talking about, the vacation. No, we're talking about removing them for the country that they came to illegally. There's almost no country in the world that allows people to just cross their border and begin a life inside that country. You have to come in legally. Would you not agree with that?
I agree with that, but there's a right and a wrong way to carry out our laws. We have a constitution in this country. We have rule of law. We have a Congress, and we cannot have a situation where we have people terrorizing not just immigrant communities, but terrorizing our communities, shooting random people in the face like Alex Perty. I mean, this is not acceptable way to carry out our laws in this country. The president and the executive branch need to enforce the laws, but they need to obey Congress because Congress is part of our Constitution in this country.
Well, let me tell you one thing, Elijah. Congress's laws are the laws that ICE is upholding. And I'm just going to ask you one more time because you didn't answer my question. Are you okay with someone crossing our border illegally, even though that's against the laws of the United States? I'm not talking about how they're removed. Are you okay with them coming in illegally?
I think I answered this question. We have to enforce the laws that we have on the books if someone's coming into the country illegally.
Okay, so they should be removed.
But there is a right and a wrong way to enforce the law. We cannot shoot people in the street. We cannot kidnap Americans off the street indiscriminately. You may be okay with that. I'm not okay with that, Martha.
No, I'm not okay with anyone being removed indiscriminately. I'm okay with the laws being upheld, and I'm okay with people doing their jobs. So, well, hopefully you'll come back because we have a lot more to talk about. So, Elijah Manley, thank you. We'll be watching your race tomorrow in Florida in the 20th District. Thank you for joining me. We'll be right back.
Thank you so much, Martha.
Thank you as well.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.